right, everybody, welcome. My name is Matthew. Thank you so much for joining. We left off last video with this national debt survey that we're doing over the course of 230 some years of the United States history. Let's try to understand national debt a little bit better. We talked about how it always is going to explode during periods of war or times of uncertainty, like the Great Depression. It's always going to increase regardless of if you have it underpinned by gold or not, if you're in a pure fiat standard or not. We're in a fiat standard here, and after the global financial crisis, it increased. After the dot-com Iraq wars, it increased. It will increase during periods of war as long as you have a government, that's going to have missiles that are bigger than what you can control and a treasury that's bigger than what you can control. Debt will explode during times of war and crisis. But now I want to show you an indicator that just shows you how much it explodes, okay? And that is the deficit itself as a proportion of debt, all right? So what I'm going to show you here is basically the increase every 12 months of debt. But what does that mean to say debt is increasing? What does that actually mean? Well, as we talked about a little bit in the first video, we have taxes, we have the expenses of the government's budget. Ideally, and what happened for a couple of years under Bill Clinton, is those are matched, they're aligned. That's what a balanced budget is. So when you're an institution, an organization, you say you have a mission, you say you want to help people, you want to do things, build roads, have a military, whatever it is, schools, lunches, whatever it might be, you pay for things, all right? That's the expense side of the balance sheet. It's not the balance sheet. It's the expense side of the income statement. On the income side of the income statement, if you're a government, that's taxes. Okay, that's what you're going to take from the populace to pay for these things that theoretically we all agree on. Theoretically, to be balanced, to have a balanced budget, to have a balanced income statement, those things are equal during any 12-month period. You can say they're equal during you can do any period you want, month, 3 months, 5 years, but typically easiest way to look at this in finance is to look at it over a 12-month period. So I'm going to draw a line here that's going to show you the deficit when those things are not equal over 12 months. Now, how will that be measured? Well, as I mentioned, the Bill Clinton example, he only balanced the budget a couple years. The rest of the time was mostly the normal case with governments, and that's where typically you have taxes over a 12-month period, say $1 trillion, but you're spending, say, $1.5 trillion. All right. So if you're spending $1.5 trillion, simple math there, what's the difference? $500 billion is deficit spending. You're spending more than you're taking in during your specific period, during your fiscal year. That's what the deficit is. How is the national debt calculated? The national debt is simply the cumulative addition of those deficits, all right? So if you do the same thing for 200 years, all right, don't make me do the math on the fly. I'm going to do it on the fly. It's 100 trillion. If you do 500 billion for 200 years, that's 100 trillion national debt that you will accumulate after 200 years, okay? We're not that high in the United States, but we're pretty high, and with compound growth, which I always like to talk about, it can come quicker than you think. So, I'm going to show you now the deficit spending as a percentage of the debt on a rolling 12-month basis. I'm going to draw that as a black line right now. Looks pretty busy, I know. What you can absolutely see here is before the gold standard, actually, in the first 100 years almost of the nation's life, if you count it from the Declaration of Independence, there were some big swings. All right, let's just zoom into them, okay? Well, let's not do that yet. Okay, so big swings, basically, before the Civil War. After the Civil War, with the exception of World War I and World War II, Great Depression, we don't see that many big swings. Okay, we see here it's a little bit more managed. A lot of people pat themselves on the back for this. They think that this is a good job done. I'm not necessarily disputing that. I'm just telling you that's what economists that have grown up during our lifetime think. They think that they're managing the situation much better than our forefathers did, than our ancestors did, okay? But clearly what we can see is big swings before the Civil War, big swings in World War I, World War II, and really not such big swings since then, even with the global financial crisis and COVID, okay? What is this again? This is deficit spending, or if we want to look at it on a period of trailing 12 months, which this is, trailing 12 months, this is actually how much you're increasing borrowing. You're increasing the national debt every period. All right, so I randomly stopped my mouse here in March 1872, $1.58 billion in debt. Did I say 1872? 1892, March 1892, $1.58 billion in debt. The deficit spend over the trailing 12 months was 2%. Okay, so that means that over the trailing 12 months ending, so starting April 1891, ending March 1892, the debt increased only 2%. Not bad, not bad. All things considered, if you look at this chart, the debt only increased 2%. So that means that if it was $1 trillion, making numbers up now, but if it was $1 trillion in taxes that they received, okay, it's only $20 billion over they spent. So that means, again, going back to our budget discussion, if they took in, I'm making up numbers here, I don't know the exact tax numbers at the time, but if they took in $1 billion, let's say, $1 billion in taxes, they would only spend 2% more than that over the last trailing 12 months. That means that they took in $1 billion, they spent $1 billion for sure, and they deficit spent $20 million. Okay, $20 million would be 2% of $1 billion. That's what this number is showing you. It's showing you generally increasing. You see there's a few periods where it's low. Particularly, remember, we paid down the national debt here in 1835 with Andrew Jackson. But typically we're exploding the debt during war or depression or financial crisis, and then it's about managing it the rest of the time. Maybe paying it down a little bit, but managing it, okay? So last video was a bit of a history lesson. I'm gonna try to be much quicker with this video. Let's just look at it again in the context of what happened, okay? So we paid down Revolutionary War debt. You see, look at the percentages, okay? It's going down. The green shaded area is going down. So we're taking it down generally. There's a few periods where we bump back up, right? 10% increase here in 1804. But generally, we're taking the debt down, so the deficit is actually a surplus, right? We're taking more in taxes, and these are excise taxes, not income taxes at the time. Taking more in taxes than we're spending, debt gets paid down, okay, on a national level for the United States. Went down 8% here on a trailing 12-month annual basis, and then explodes, War of 1812, 45% per year goes up, okay? So I showed you just the brute nominal figures in the last video. Here we can see the percentages go up 45%. We get to Jackson and the closing of the Second Bank of the United States. We're completely gone. There is no national debt, so numbers are going to look a little bit funky here. But then we quickly increase again, and then let me zoom in even more. We do some big jumps here, and since the base is so low, these percentages are pretty wild. So this is pretty wild for sure. But this is, again, antebellum United States. There's a lot of tension here between the South and the North. We eventually get to the Civil War, and the North, in particular, raises a lot of money, forces banks to hold national government bonds, war bonds, as an asset on their books beyond gold as a reserve. The debt is exploding here, so it's off the charts. Even I stop at 100%. We increase the debt here. Look, as we go up, look at how the green shaded area moves up, but as a percentage, that rate crests about here, 500% increase by the, I don't know, first full year after the Civil War started, something like that. Huge increase in debt, and then as we see, this percentage line will go down as the debt levels off, okay, and then it goes down again. It's the same concept that I showed you before. Gold standard period here was going on. The whole world moved to gold. International gold standard is a very short period, only about 40 years. 40 years from 1870 to the start of World War I. We were up and down, paying down debt a little bit here. Then we turned it around, increasing debt a little bit, couple percent, 5%, maybe 6%, 10% a year here. This is just trailing 12 months rolling averages. But what this black line is it's showing you deficit spending, okay? Because again, taxes minus your government expenditures, the ideal number is 0, all right? Unless you're a modern monetary theorist who doesn't follow the laws of economics at all, normal economics, says deficit spending doesn't matter. It's absolutely not the case. If you want to be a worthy creditor and you have competitive markets around the world, it's absolutely not the case. You want to pay down debt, all right? And when crises occur, like war, like financial crises, the opposite happens, right? We spend, right? So debt increases again here. World War I, you see it explode over 100%. By December 1917, World War II, we see it explode 88%. So this is putting percentages on the raw figures that I showed you before. And notice how it can even come down. So the crest is actually before the war is over, okay? 88% a year. Full increase. The deficit spend is 88% of the trailing 12 months, 88% of the debt. So billions of dollars. So by the way, we can raw back into the number, all right? So 100% would be we spent 130, if the debt was 136 billion and the deficit was 100%, it means we spent 136 billion on top of 136 billion that we received from taxes. That's what that deficit was spent would be. We spent a little bit less than 136 billion, 88% to be precise, over what we already received in taxes during this time during World War II. And then you see the rate of increase falls immediately here. And that's just because we've caught, if you can imagine, look at the green shaded area. It's still growing up, but it's not growing at as fast of a clip. All right, so it's growing here at only 40%, 50%, and then literally when the war ends in Europe, May 1945, we stop at a gross number. Ended a little bit later with Japan, of course, but we have stopped exploding the debt precisely as the war ends. Okay, that's what deficit spending is. So we got to this period where the Bretton Woods gold standard had ended, where, again, that was simply the United States held all of the gold because 2/3 of the world gold, central bank gold, moved into the United States after World War II, getting away from the evil that was Stalin and Hitler. 2/3 of the world gold was in the United States, so Bretton Woods, the conglomeration of economists, Friedman, Hayek, Mises, many others, in the 1944 conference in New Hampshire. They said, let's just have the United States hold the gold. The dollar will be the reserve currency for central banks around the world, the free world in particular. That lasted not so long. Zooming out back again here, that lasted only from 44, not even 30 full years, okay, 27 years, basically. Was this period. The Vietnam War was all during this period, basically. Charles de Gaulle didn't trust and wanted the gold back. But basically from this period now, so when Bretton Woods ended, and now we're on a pure fiat standard because basically no one trusts the United States to hold the gold. The United States themselves says we're not going to give you the gold back. We're temporarily closing the gold window. It took Germany a long time to get their gold back. France took some time, other countries as well. Some countries left it in custody of the United States, but regardless, there's no more gold standard here. United States citizens are at least allowed to own gold at this point. And again, we do start what looks like a period of great moderation. And here's where I want to show you in percentage terms what I discussed in the last video. We're still increasing the debt at a good clip. The Vietnam War ended here in 75, a 20-year war for the United States, disastrous war in many ways. Fighting communism is the idea, which is not something I take lightly, by the way, but that was the decision that was made, 20-year war to fight communism. After that ended, still conflicts around the world, conflicts that the United States is involved in around the world, but this is what the period of the Great Moderation was, basically from 1980 to 2000. And you see that the debt is increasing, but it's not exploding, all right? So we're sort of managing the rate of increase in the debt, and it's a bit higher. Notice how the clip here it's smoother than what happened in all the history before, but it's higher. We're increasing the debt at 10% a year. Most of the 80s, a little bit less in the 90s, actually, before the dot-com bust. But we can see that it's higher but smoother here. Okay, here it's lower but more jaggedy. Way jaggedy during the wars and depressions. So there's a lot of self-congratulatory backslapping and congratulations here. And all older economists today, they cut their teeth in these markets. They sort of learned that deficit spending is the way to go. It smooths out the business cycle. The period of great moderation is when a lot of economists that are alive today, on TV today, when they cut their teeth, when they were in school, when they were earning their doctorate degrees, it just seemed like we had kind of figured it out. And then we look at the percentage here. It actually goes down, becomes a little bit of an issue in the 90s. Clinton says he's going to balance the budget. We had a divided Congress in the United States, Newt Gingrich for the Republicans, and a divided government, I should say, because the Democrat in the presidency. And we go literally to where, remember what I told you, deficit spending is just simply a rate of increase of the debt over a trailing 12-month basis. If you look at it over 12 months, we go from really not increasing the debt, and we crest here, cresting to negative in October 2000. Okay, so the debt officially didn't increase anymore and actually decreased a little bit in Clinton's last year. And remember, he would leave in January 2001. A couple of negative periods here as well in 2001 when Bush came in. Real sweet spot here. All right, this was before the crash of the dot-com. Real interesting time. But then, of course, the dot-com did crash. 9/11 happened, Iraq War. More deficit spending in that period was over. All right, so we still increased it in a smooth way. All right, but the clip was much faster. Back up to 7, 8, 9, 10% growth. Tried to level out again. Global financial crisis. More debt increase. Okay, so the debt increase here, the debt or borrow increase, which is simply a trailing 12 months of the deficit, as a percentage of the debt, increased 20%. Understand that. The debt at the time is only, let's just round numbers, say, taking a moment to remind you that this show is brought to you by Trezor, home of the original Bitcoin hardware wallet. For over 10 years now, Trezor means business in Bitcoin security and functionality. When using their wallet software Trezor Suite to connect to the Bitcoin network, you're automatically connected via Tor, protecting your identity and giving you full control of your coins in a fully open source manner, both on the software level and on the hardware level. So head on over to Trezor.io to grab your Trezor Safe 3 with a secure element, Model T with a touchscreen, or the original Trezor 1, as well as a ton of available accessories to back up your keys and keep your coins safe. This show is proud to be associated with Trezor. $10 trillion. If you're increasing that debt at a clip of 15% a year, what is that? That's $1.5 trillion now. Big numbers, all right? Big numbers in nominal terms, way different than here when you have even $5 trillion and you're balancing the budget versus here, 10, 11 trillion and you're going up 20% a year. Big numbers during the global financial crisis, all right? That's stacking on $2 trillion a year. Big numbers that happened during the global financial crisis. Way bigger than it ever happened in the history of the United States. Okay? Because let's take $2 trillion as an example. All right, let's go back. When was the last time we had $2 trillion? It was only 1986. All right, during Reagan's period, the United States went this whole period. All right, it always looks parabolic when you go on linear scale, but it took 200 years for the United States to get to $2 trillion, $2,000 billion in debt. And then when the global financial crisis hits, you can make that rate of increase in a year. So powerful stuff. All right. This is the power of compounding interest. This is the power of exponential growth. And this is also the power of, what happens to things at scale. All right. Remember that old compounding interest exercise? It's, at certain compounding growth, the stadium is half full with water. When is it full? You have an hour. The answer is it's 11:59. So it can very quickly, the stadium can become full of water with compounding growth. And that's just the case here. All right. Really things exploded after the global financial crisis. And there wasn't if you just looked at this chart, there wasn't necessarily anything to tell you that was going to happen. All right, a lot of backslapping here, a lot of self-congratulatory talk from Keynesian economists all around the world, specifically in the United States, saying this is how you manage your budget. All right, you get through a crisis, all right, like 1987 Wall Street or 2001 .com, 9/11. You just get through that by deficit spending a little bit more, all right? But all of a sudden you have huge numbers, and now, just in the course of a decade or two, you go from having $2 trillion as your entire national debt to having $2 trillion as the deficit. That's powerful. All right, so that increases here. This is, global financial crisis time. You don't really see too much of QE, the monetization of the debt. We'll talk about that in a future video. But you do see still the debt, even though it's increasing at a slower clip here through Obama and then Trump and Biden. And Biden, of course, with COVID here, a big jump. Trump and Biden, I should say. It's not at all, the budget is not at all balanced. And now, look, just look how fast this thing grows. Look at the number. We're at $34.6 trillion. A 10% deficit spend over the trailing 12 months. That means we spent $3.4 trillion in addition to what we took in taxes. All right, so if the taxes were roughly 3, 4, 5 trillion, which it is, 3, 4, 5 trillion on any given trailing 12-month period, you're going to spend that 3, 4, 5 trillion, but you're also going to spend, in addition, another 3 trillion. That's the deficit spend. It adds to the national debt. That's how you look at it. So this is one factor of how deficit spending, the indicator of how it looks over the national debt. It's a long period, 200 and some years. I know it's big, but we're going to try to distill it down even further in the next video. Let me know if you have any comments. Thanks for watching.